5 scores! Rick Vaughn.
We decided to get ourselves back in the game again with our podcast.
Rick Vaughn, Gary Neville.
Probably the craziest story that you're ever going to hear about hockey.
We're going to be coming back to you on a regular basis.
You are listening to Squid and the Ultimate Leafs Fan.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans of the United States and Newfoundland, and an extra big hello to Canadian servicemen overseas.
Well, welcome everyone to episode 53 of the Squid and Ultimate Leaf Fan Show. I'm Mike Wilson, the Ultimate Leafs fan. Joining me as always, my winger, Ricky Squid Vive. Squid, how are we keeping? How was the golf game today?
Golf game was okay. Currently, there was a lot of guys still on the course, and we have a senior tour here now, Doug, that we 5 events in Niagara. And I was third the first event, and this one I'm currently tied for third. And but there's still a lot of guys out on the golf course, so we'll see what happens.
Well, Squid, I want to say that our guest today is a fellow down east. You've just slipped it up a little bit there for us, but that's okay. This is live TV, and we're across the world, so everybody will get a little insight that way. But another Dan Easterner from Summerside, PEI, well-known in the media world, came up through the coaching ranks, starting off at the University of New Brunswick, ran an NHL club, ran a couple NHL clubs, one of the builders of the Columbus Blue Jackets, never afraid to voice an opinion, affectionately known as Prince Eddie. Please welcome to the Ultimate Leaf Fan and the Squid Show, Doug MacLean. Doug, how's it going these days?
Well, it's pretty quiet. I'm doing a little show with Kiprios 3 days a week, which is really a pain in the ass, but it's it's fine. I mean, we're having some fun doing it, but I could certainly do without it. But Kippy's got to work. I'm retired, so anything to help a buddy.
Well, before we get underway, Squid and I love the nicknames. Now, yours seems pretty obvious for people who know you, but who laid that handle on you, Prince Eddie?
I don't know where that ever came from. I mean, you know what? I never had a nickname till I got to Sportsnet, and I became Mac at Sportsnet. That was the first time I ever had a nickname in my life, which is pretty bizarre. So Mac started at Sportsnet. The Prince Eddie was just, I don't know. I saw it one time written somewhere, and I thought, where the hell did that ever come from? But you know what? It's because I used to talk about PEI all the time, and people thought it was, I had quite a bit of real estate here and an apartment building and stuff, so I was always promoting, trying to help myself, but I mean, I got credit for it, but anyway, it's a great place to be from, as Ricky knows. We love it here. We spend a lot of time in PEI. And, we're usually here 4.5 months a year. So it's great.
Well, Doug, if I had your money, then I'd have a place there. But unfortunately, I didn't make that much playing. And Al Eagleson did a good job on our pension. So for 13 years, I get $1,000 a month. That's not too shabby.
No, that's not bad, But you know what? I guess I don't know. I got into real estate. I remember a guy coming to visit me in PEI 20 years ago, a friend of mine in Florida, and he said, Doug, he said, the land here is free, So we formed a bit of a company. We started doing things, but we love it. Our kids have grown up here. They played a lot of summer sports here and hockey schools here, so it's really been a big part of our family life, to be quite honest. So we love it here. We're on the ocean, and it's pretty tough to beat. And we spend 7 months in Florida, so I don't think it's about money. I guess it's just you go where you go and you make the best of it.
It's the lifestyle. Well, before we get into your career and coming up, we obviously talk about what the obvious is right now. Currently, your thoughts on the way the finals are shaped up in the National Hockey League?
Well, I mean, for you and Rick, it's pretty depressing when you see Montreal going where they are and your Leafs playing with Ricky. Are they playing with you in this tournament or what? So
well, they're not old enough. It's 55 and over.
It's just not good that the Leafs are watching the Montreal Canadiens, who were the worst seed to get in the playoffs. It's been a great story, to be quite honest, but for the Leaf fans, it's tough to swallow when it's 3-1 and then you see this team going to the finals. That happens. They played pretty good hockey. Can they beat Tampa Bay? That's the $1 million question. And you know what? I think it's got a chance to be a hell of a series. I really do. Mm-hmm. With the way their big four on the back end is defending, and the character of a Weber and a Price, and the kids are playing well, and the veterans are playing well. If they can stay out of the penalty box, they have a chance. They have a chance to make it a series. I think they really do.
Well, I was going to say to you, since you've opened it up, and we do have a Maple Leaf bias slightly on this show, put your GM hat back on for a second, Doug, and walk us through what you do with the state the Maple Leafs are sitting today.
Well, it's a really tough. I hate to do that because I know how tough it is when you're in that job. And I was with an expansion team, and for 8-9 years, and it was a grind. It's a real grind, and that's when expansion teams were real expansion teams, not the fake ones they have today. But it was a grind. But here's what I was thinking today. If I'm the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs and I'm watching the playoffs, I'm concerned about two things. I'm concerned about, do my players play playoff hockey, which has been well documented. But I'll tell you another thing that would really concern me today, that I'm going into the season next year with the Toronto Maple Leafs, a very similar team, but Jack Campbell is my number one goaltender. Now, I like Jack Campbell. Jack Campbell had a good 15 games or whatever he played, 20 games, whatever he played. But when you watch the goaltending that's going on in playoffs today, I'm not sure Jack Campbell stacks up. And that would be scary to me. That would be absolutely frightening to me from the Maple Leafs. I think they got a thin back end. And I think they've got a lot of guys that don't like to play playoff hockey. How much can they change that between now and October? That's a big task, especially when Hyman is a critical guy to get signed, and they may not be able to have the dollars to get him done.
Well, that's again, Doug. So where do you go from there when you got four guys making over $40 million of an 81.5 flat cap? Do you move one or two of those big guys and perhaps try to bring back something cheaper and maybe a little bit younger or around the same age? That's going to make you a better team and a better playoff team. I agree with you 100%. I think they're a team that's great in the regular season, but they don't play playoff hockey.
But the challenge is, who is the guy? You can't move Tavares. That's a given. You cannot move Tavares' deal unless you take so much back. So that to me, that's a no-brainer. You can't move Matthews because he's too good. Mm-hmm. To me, the obvious Marner. I love Marner. I know he struggled in the playoff time, but I still love Marner as a player. I think he's an important guy for them, and I think he's going to grow into it. To me, Nylander had a great playoff, but he's probably the guy that makes the most sense. And then try to move that money into two players. Maybe it's to help get Hyman signed, and maybe it's to bring in another defenseman, because $1 million defenseman, the Bogosians and these guys are okay. They get you through it. But you see how important Weber, Petrie, Edmondson, these guys become real important players. You look at the defense on Tampa Bay: Hedman, McDonough, Sergachev, Savard. It just goes on, and Chernak. It just goes on with big body defenders. So their blue line to me is not playoff ready. So you got to help fix that. And Riley's going to be a challenge to get signed. So I think Nylander's the guy. That's just my own opinion. Everybody's talking Marner because he had an off playoff, but Marner could get 20 points next year in the playoffs if he and Matthews figure this out and get it going.
Well, we've discussed that many times on our show, and with lots of people sending us questions. The obvious thing out there is, here's one for you that everybody seems the narrative is with Morgan Riley obviously being a focal point going into the new year. That could be very dangerous if you don't get something done with him. How about this trade that's being thrown around by people and media and stuff? Going to Columbus, would you swap Marner for Seth Jones?
1 for 1?
Yes.
I would do it, and I would do it so fast your head would spin.
That was our answer too, by the way.
Now, you know what? I mean, this is a guy that, that's going to be a really tough deal because there's all kinds of teams lined up trying to get Seth Jones. Seth didn't have a good year this year, by the way. He was
That's
pretty
right.
average this year, but it was kind of a messed up year there. But
Yeah.
Look, that's no disrespect to Marner. I happen to really like this kid as a player. I really do. So, but I mean, when you look, to me, guys, Morgan Riley is a very, very good number 2 defenseman. I don't have Morgan Riley as a number 1 guy. And Ricky, and you guys know this, how many teams win a Stanley Cup without that big number 1 defenseman, whether it's Niedermeyer, whether it's Pronger, whether it's Lidstrom, they go on and on. That big number 1 guy that's the horse, Hedman.
Yeah.
I mean, it just goes on and on. There's been the odd team that won a Stanley Cup without that big guy, but very few. So, and I love Morgan Riley, but I've got him as a great number 2. I don't have him in the category of the big horses that are the number 1 guys in the league.
Squid?
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with you on that one. I think again, I love Mitch Marner too. Whether he'll figure it out how to play in the playoffs, I'm not really sure. But if you can get Seth Jones, a big, strong defenseman that can complement Riley and the rest of their defense, I think you do it in a heartbeat. I don't think you even hesitate.
And it'll be interesting to see what kind of deals. I know Philadelphia are making a big push to get him. Colorado will probably. Dallas will probably. There's lots of rumors of teams that are making a big push. But listen, Marner's a hell of a player, guys. He's a hell of a player. But here's the problem for the Blue Jackets. The Blue Jackets need a center iceman. They desperately need a center iceman. Marner, I know he's played some center. I don't have him as that big number 1 centerman, but he's a hell of a player. So I don't know if it's a fit for Columbus, but it would be an interesting conversation. I know that.
Well, we thought it would be a good fit for Columbus because they made a big pitch and they paid a big price for Laney. And this would give Laney somebody to play with. So that was the thinking between our rationale by making that trade. Secondly, Doug, the last question before we move on. Do you think Sheldon Keefe is the right voice for this team, or do they need a more experienced one?
Well, you know what? I think Sheldon is a solid coach. He's paid his dues. I hate to second guess him this early. Did he have a great background? Well, he had a better background. He had as good a background as I had when I coached in the Stanley Cup Final. So it's hard for me to criticize a guy with limited experience. I remember when I got the job in Florida, the guy at TSN asked if I was the 4th or the 5th choice for the job. So, it's hard for me to criticize. I don't think Sheldon's the problem. I think, and Ricky knows this better than I do, at playoff time, it's easier to defend than it is to fight through. It's easier to coach when you're the defensive coach versus the guy that's trying to create offense. That is unbelievably challenging. I watched Peter DeBoer, who's one of the most experienced coaches in the NHL, fumble his way through a series of Montreal. They said Bartolomé was fired in Vegas because he couldn't do in-game adjustments, which I call bullshit. And DeBoer was brought in to do in-game adjustments. And I said the other day on Nick's podcast, DeBoer better show me some in-game adjustments here real fast or they're going to be on the sidelines. So hard to do in-game adjustments when you're the offensive team. It really is. Cooper seems to be able to do it, but he's got a hell of a lot of talent. So, you know what? They were able to fight through the Islanders' neutral zone play and defensive zone play. Toronto couldn't figure it out. I don't know if it was Keefe any more than it was the players. I'm not blaming it on Sheldon.
Well, I think, Doug, I got to blame it on the entire coaching staff because they didn't make any adjustments during that Montreal series. I mean, even when they went down, Montreal won the second game and it's 3-2, they just kept playing the same way. They didn't change their power play. They didn't change the way they played. They just kept doing the same thing, and it wasn't working. And,
well,
I look at the whole coaching staff and say, guys, you look at video, you got a guy upstairs watching. Can you not see that you've got to change the way you're playing in order to beat this hockey team?
Well, you're right. I think sometimes the arrogance takes over. You become a little arrogant when you had the season that the Leafs had and that when they're up 3-1 in a series. But what was frightening was, and you basically said it, Ricky, is that they weren't in these last couple of games. It wasn't close at times, and Montreal took over that series, which is hard to believe. It's hard to believe that Marner, Matthews, and look, in fairness, they didn't have Tavares. I get that, but they were having trouble generating a whole lot. They couldn't generate much. And you said the power play was abysmal. I mean, they couldn't get anything through. Yeah. So, I don't know. Price was terrific, but goaltenders are typically great at playoff time. That's why I'm concerned about their goaltending, and nobody else is. But I am.
Well, actually, we discussed that on this show because he needs a backup, and unless they go with Joseph Woll, who they've been grooming for the last couple of years, any goalie that's an unrestricted free agent makes more than Campbell. So that's going to be a challenge in itself. So you're either going to replace him with the starter, or it's going to be pretty tough to tell him the backup you're making more than the starter. So we'll sit back and see how that.
I was talking to some people in Seattle today, and they're nervous about the expansion draft because of lack of goaltenders that are available. You go through the teams right today that are available for the expansion draft. Look at, Vegas end up with Fleury. Yeah, it was a trade. It was a setup with Pittsburgh. I get that. But what goaltenders are available for Seattle? And you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, and you're a contender, and you've got a guy that's got 4 or 5 playoff games and total experience in his career, and you're talking winning a Stanley Cup. I'm sorry, that's frightening for me. That really is. And I like Jack Campbell. He's a good goaltender, but you got to be an elite goaltender typically to win the Stanley Cup.
Well, as you pointed out, the 4 remaining goalies, as you saw at the semifinals, now the 2 remaining. This is a level you have to be at to win a Stanley Cup, and that's never changed, and it isn't going to change.
And where do the Leafs get the money to? So let's say Jack Campbell. What if he stumbles? Where do the Leafs get the money to bring in?
Well, that's the point.
Top goaltenders are $5 to $7 million a year now. That's the problem. So anyway, nobody's talking about their goaltending, and I never hear it mentioned. But of course, I'm not in the circles that you guys are in anymore. But I'm just a little bit concerned, and I don't get Kyle at times. I mean, he makes a big announcement to sign Jason Spezza. Are you serious? What's the rush to announce that Montreal are going to the Stanley Cup Final, and they announce that's a signing, and now they're negotiating with Simmons, and then they announce that they hired a new coach GM for the Marlies. Who gives a shit right now? The fans want the Stanley Cup. They don't give a shit about who the Marlies GM is. What the hell are they announced? Announce it when it's a soft week of news, for God's sake. Anyway,
well, as you know, the Maple Leafs there's never a shortage of things to talk about with the Maple Leafs, and there never will be. So this will be an ongoing sag as we move forward. But Doug, we wanted to get into a little bit of you and your background. So let's go right back to the beginning. You start off. You played a little bit Montreal Junior Canadiens on not a very good team. You got to play. You played with Ian Turnbull. You ended up playing at UPEI, your hometown team, university. I had a couple of buddies that played there. And you ended up as a head coach at the University of New Brunswick. Walk us through how that all developed.
It's kind of a miracle, isn't it? So I played with the Junior Canadiens. Yeah, Ian Turnbull was a teammate of mine. Actually, we used to drive from Dorval into Montreal every day. So that Andre Saint Laurent was also a member of that team. There was a few guys that played in the NHL off that team, but I mean, it was so I was there a year and a half with Montreal. I think I scored 5 goals a year. I was really a big year. And I went to St. Louis Blues training camp, and St. Louis sent me to their first farm team was in Salt Lake City, and St. Louis sent me to Johnstown, to the Johnstown Jets. And so I go there to training camp, and I had one of those Hockey Canada scholarships that, would pay full 4-year ride with Hockey Canada in those days. And actually, the way I got it is Brian Murray, who coached against me in Ontario, recommended me for it. I didn't even know Brian Murray. He recommended me for the Hockey Canada scholarship. And I was playing in an all-star game that Brian was coaching in junior. So I go to the GM of Johnstown, and I said, look, I'm here, and I've got a chance to go to university on a full ride for 4 years. And his name was Mitchell. He's a famous GM. The Mitchell Cup is East Coast League, or was a famous. Well, he was a GM. He was the character in Slapshot. So anyway, he looked at me and he said, "Listen, I watched you play the last 2 weeks. If you were my son, I'd tell you to go to university." So then I was having dinner that night, and there was this famous Johnstown Jet was having dinner with his name was Reg Kent. And if you look at the East Coast League, you'll see that Reg Kent was one of the leading scorers every year. And I was sitting there at 19, and Reg Kent was sitting there at 32. And I told him I had a chance to go to college or to stay in Johnstown. And he looked at me and he said, "You know what?" And I said, St. Louis sent me here. And he said, "You know what?" He said, "Detroit sent me here 9 years ago, and I've never heard another word from them since. So maybe you should go," he said. That ended my pro career right there. So, but anyway, to add to that story, not to bore you, when I was GM in Columbus, I was driving around the freeway with my son, who was 9 at the time, Clark, and Don Waddell's on the radio doing or I shouldn't say Don Waddell is. The guy, Dave Hansen. Dave Hansen was on doing an interview on Slapshot. And he said, "Well, he said, your GM could have been in the movie here, but he wasn't good enough looking. He was in Johnstown with us that year, and he wasn't good enough looking to make the movie." And my kid looks at me and said, "You could have been in Slapshot and you blew that?" So that's how close I came to being a star, right there.
Well, now, what about coaching at the University of New Brunswick?
Well, I ended up, when I graduated from university, I became a high school teacher in Summerside. And I actually taught high school for 7 years. Gerard Gallant was one of my students. I'll never forget the day I was asking them what they wanted to do when they finished school. And Gerard was 16 at the time I was teaching him. And he said he wanted to be a postman. And I said to him after class, I said, "Gerard, can you go to Sherbrooke next year to play Major Junior?" I said, "Gerard, I'd focus on the hockey if I was you and forget about being the postman." So that's the best advice. So I've known Gerard since he was 11 years of age. So anyway, I was a high school teacher. Then I went back and did a master's in special educational psychology at the University of Western Ontario, and I became assistant coach with the London Knights. And I was there for a year when I was doing my master's. And from there, I applied and got the UNB job. And I was at the UNB for 1 year. And Jacques Martin phoned out of the blue. I had worked hockey schools with Jacques, and he phoned me. He was supposed to come to my hockey school at UNB, and he phoned me out of the blue, and he said, "Doug, I can't make it to your hockey school." And I said, "You son of a bitch, I got you down on knee at my hockey." He said, "No, I can't make it." He said, "I'm getting hired in St. Louis tomorrow, and wanted to become my assistant coach." And that's how it happened. Jacques Martin sort of gave me the biggest break of my life, and then from there, when we got fired in St. Louis, Brian Murray phoned and offered me a job in Washington, and I you know what? It was fluky, and I was really lucky, and I ended up with like 24 years in the NHL, which is kind of amazing.
Squid?
Wow. And so you end up in Washington with Brian Murray, and then later on you end up in Detroit with Brian Murray as well. So you were running Adirondack, I believe, at the time when they won the Calder Cup. They beat St. John's. And neither team won a home game in that series. I remember that. And so it was against St. John's, Newfoundland.
Yeah.
But the funny thing about that is I set up a meeting with Brian because I was coaching in Charleston in the ECHL, and we were looking for another affiliate other than Buffalo. Yeah. So I go in. Brian was great, wonderful person and a great guy. Yeah. So he sets up a meeting. I go in, and I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to him. And you know, Brian had that list.
Yeah. And
I'm sitting there for a while, and I'm thinking to myself, is he just fucking with me, or is this real, or what? You know, and then, well, 15 minutes into the meeting, I realized that, oh, no, this is real. I said to myself, I said, boy, am I ever glad that I didn't tell him to stop clowning around or something. But you know what? So we didn't get the affiliate. We didn't get the affiliation anyway.
Brian, you know, it was amazing. Brian was coach at Pembroke, and I played an All-Star game, Sudbury against the Central Junior All-Stars, and Brian was the coach. And I met him there. They were when I was at UPI. The Rockland were playing in Charlottetown against Charlottetown in the Centennial Cup or whatever it was.
Yeah, I was there.
And I went over and I said hello to Brian on the bench and we talked, and you know, hadn't seen him in 4 or 5 years. The next time I saw him was at the draft when I was with UNB. And then out of the blue, when we got fired in St. Louis, he phoned me and asked me to come into Washington interview. And that's as fluky as it gets, because you know what, that Jacques Martin gave me a huge break, but I'll tell you what, Brian Murray, I mean, I was with Brian for 12 years, you know, so it was pretty cool, to be quite honest. Good looking guy.
Brian was coaching Rockland against us, the Colonel Greg Colonels, in the Centennial Cup. Yeah. And they beat us 4 straight. They beat us 4 straight that year. Yeah.
That was a year. That's unbelievable. Eh? So it's, you know what, like you made it as a player. That's different. I mean, I always think back to make it as a coach when I never played in the league. And from PEI, I was really, really lucky. I'll tell you what, I was really lucky. It just took a lot of breaks and luck along the way to have an NHL career. And I'm pretty thankful for it, I'll tell you that.
Well, what we're talking about luck, Doug, how about this one? Now, we've heard Chris Draper, when you were with Adirondack running the Red Wings team. Now, we've heard of a player being traded for a bag of hammers or for a roll of tape, but for $1, this could be one of the greatest trades ever.
That was an amazing deal. I'll tell you how that happened. We were, you know, they always wanted to have a good team at Adirondack, as Ricky said. I mean, it was critical for the market. It was a small market, but they had a great history there. So I'll tell you how we ended up signing Chris Draper. Jim Clark, who skips for Ottawa now, was a great buddy of mine, was with the Summerside Capitals with me for a number of years. Jimmy now is with Ottawa. He ended up coming to Columbus with me. But Jimmy was our maritime scout for Detroit at the time. And he phoned me and he said, Doug, he said, you got to consider this kid Draper in Moncton. He looks like he's on the outs with Winnipeg. He's like a 3rd round pick. He can fly. I think he's got a chance to be a player. So I phoned Mike Smith and I said, Mike, what about Draper? I knew Mike Smith really liked him, but I heard his coach, John Paddock, didn't like him. So Mike Smith said to me, he said, I love Draper, and I want to do him a favor. I'll trade him to you for $1. Because I want to see him get a chance. And I thought, are you shitting me? So we made the deal. And then it got squirrely with the NHL because it was first come out as future considerations. So we made the deal for future considerations. And then we said, okay, what are we going to do? We got to put a value on this. And Mike says, give me $1. So I actually gave Mike $1. So that's how it happened. And then he comes to training camp and he's struggling in training camp. I mean, he looked good, but he didn't make the Red Wings. And so he gets sent on to Adirondack, and he says he thinks he's going to go back to Toronto and consider whether he's going to play or not, or just quit hockey. I phoned Newell Brown, the coach of Adirondack. I said, you phone Drapes right now, and you work him hard to get him to Adirondack. So he goes to Adirondack. He has an unbelievable year. Timmy Taylor was another guy we signed that same time, and Timmy also went with Drapes, and Steve Malte were the three. Another guy, Peterson, we signed the Medicine Hat. Four of them had great years. But Scotty Bowman and I went to Hamilton at Christmas to watch Adirondack play. Scotty was the head coach, and Drapes had a hat trick. Called him up after the game, and he never played another game in the minors, and the rest is history. So Jimmy Clark was really the guy that deserves the credit for the Red Wings getting Chris Draper, and what a career, and what a kid he is. I mean, he's just an amazing guy. Yeah. So it's kind of funny how
is he not one of the brass with the Red Wings now with assistant?
Yeah, he's like Stevie Y's main guy there. You know, he's overseeing our amateur, and I'm not sure what else, but he's a real important guy, and he's been he's a run into him at minor hockey tournaments, and I was watching Clark and looking with Clark looking for players. So I've sort of run into Drapes a lot over the years, but he's a wonderful guy, and what an amazing career he really had. But talk about a guy, talk about the Leafs and what they need for guys that play at playoffs. How good was
guys like him
at playoff time?
Yeah,
that he was the
exactly
playoff type guy. You know, they're hard to find sometimes.
Well, I was watching a game the other night with, I'm down here in Florida with an old friend of yours, Jim Devellano, and I brought that trade up, and he said, you know, Mike, for years I've gotten credit for that trade, and I always tell everybody that was nothing to do with me. That was all Doug MacLean. So he does pass your allocates along about that trade.
Well, I hear a lot of people getting credit for it, and I kind of chuckle, but Jimmy D has said that to me more than once. And I'll tell you another thing. Jimmy D scouted me when I was playing junior, and actually invited me to the New York Islanders training camp when Jimmy D was a scout with the New York Islanders. So that's how far you go back with some of these guys. Isn't it bizarre? Wow. Really bizarre. And he stuck my scouting report underneath my office report when I was assistant GM in Detroit, and he was vice president. So I'm glad I get to manage him.
So talk about how you ended up in Florida and how the job came about, the big leagues now.
Well, you know what, I had been with Brian for a number of years in Washington, and then with him for 5 years in Detroit, and all of a sudden he fires Roger Nielsen. Roger Nielsen, obviously legendary coach, and Brian just felt they needed to change. I mean, he loved what Roger did, but he made the coach. He decided to make a coaching change. So I was living in Detroit at the time, and I met Brian at Bob's Big Boy restaurant. And I said, we were sitting there, and I said, I know you're going to hire a coach. And he said, yeah. And I said, look, I've been your assistant for 10 years or whatever. And I said, Brian, I'm telling you, you'd be an idiot if you don't give me a chance at that job. And Larry Robinson's name was in there, and all the big names were in there. And I thought, oh, geez. So I said, Brian, you'd be an idiot. And I remember sitting in the restaurant, and he looked at me. He said, is that right? So then it went through I had to meet with Tori, and then I had to go through the whole process. So it was like a 2-month process. And I was up in Mill River, PEI, at a hockey school up there. And we went over to the swimming pool. My son, Clark, was in the pool. There's about 8 swimming. And I got a call at the rink to phone Brian Murray in Florida. Because we didn't have cell phones then. So I phoned him from the swimming pool on the payphone. And he said, yeah. He said, you just got the job in Florida. And I just about fainted. And it was a sort of a dream come true. So, getting the job there was really, really, it was an amazing feeling when you spend a long time, never thinking you really will ever get a chance. And then you get a chance to be a head coach in the NHL, and then obviously go to the Stanley Cup Finals in year 1, and I was All-Star coach 2 years in a row. I mean, I've got some great memories, to be quite honest. That's a great picture there. John Van Beesbrook sort of helped me become a good coach, I found,
Well, I was going to say to you,
that year you went to the finals. sorry, the year you went to the finals, like that was a year of the Rats.
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell was that like with all those rats raining down on the ice? You must have been ducking and getting out of the way.
It was unbelievable. I tell you what, I absolutely loved it. I mean, Mellenby and Van Beesbrook are the guys that started in actually game one. It wasn't game one. It was, I think, game 3 or 4 in Florida where they killed a rat in our dressing room. And Mellenby killed it with his hockey stick in the dressing room. And then Van Beesbrook said after to the media that Mellenby had a rat trick. He had 2 goals. He killed a rat in the dressing room. And it took off. But I'm telling you, a buddy of mine was on the ice cleaning up the rats. And he counted one night 900 rats on the ice in Florida when we scored a goal. I friggin' loved it because that meant we scored a goal. And everybody was whining about it. I loved it. So it was an amazing, and we had a good team. Like Van Beesbrook, you talk about coaching, like how important is goaltending to become a good coach. But John Van Beesbrook was unbelievable in those couple of years there, and we had some great character guys in Mellenby, Strudlin, and Lowry, and Gordon Murphy, and Joe Banowski was a kid, and Warner was a kid, and Niedermeyer was a kid. We had a great group of kids, and Lindy Ruff and Dwayne Sutter were my assistants, and they were terrific. So Billy Smith was my goalie coach, if you can believe that. So they were a great group, really.
So I was going to say,
you had those guys that are playoff guys, Screwdlin and Mellenby and players like that. Those character guys that show up when it really counts. And I mean, that's what it takes to get to the Stanley Cup Finals or to win a Stanley Cup. I mean, you can't win without those guys.
I mean, think about this. Dave Lowry scored 10 goals in that playoff run. Mike Huff scored big goals for us. I mean, Huffer was a 5-goal scorer, 7-goal scorer, but just a character, penalty killer, checker type of guy. I mean, and you know what's really amazing? When I look back at that group of guys, all of them did really well in life. You know, whether it was business, whether it was in hockey, whether it was in other areas, they've all done really well as a group. So they were a tremendous character, quality group of guys, I'll tell you. And you still hear from quite a few of them. It's amazing. Like Tommy Fitzgerald, the GM in Jersey. I mean, it's on and on. Dave Lowry in Winnipeg. I mean, it's great to see so many of them have done so well.
Well, everything sort of runs its course, as you know, especially as a coach, Doug. And, you know, you lived the night yourself. So a couple of years of that, then all of a sudden you're not there any longer. The Columbus opportunity. Now, walk us through that and just what your expectations were going. And you're basically coming from running an expansion team. So here you are picking this one up. So walk us through the Columbus experience.
Well, it was pretty bizarre because, you know, I was a coach in Florida, and it was a GM's job that was in Columbus. And I'll tell you how it happened is when I was coaching Baltimore Spectacles in the American Hockey League years prior, I met this guy through a friend of mine after a game, and he worked for a steel company. Then when I was in Detroit, I got a call from this guy asking if he could bring some clients down by the Red Wing dressing room after the game. And I brought him down after the game in Detroit. Never thought a thing of it. Guy from Baltimore. So Columbus get the franchise. And I get a call from this guy from Baltimore. And he said, hey, you know, I met you in Baltimore. You brought me down to the dressing room in Detroit. You know, we don't know each other, but we're acquaintances. Of my steel company just bought an NHL team, and I'm putting your name forward for the job. And I said, are you shitting me? So the next thing I get a call from the owner, and he lives 5 minutes from me in Florida. And I drive down to the Palm Beach or to Gulfstream Country Club and meet him for lunch. And I went through a month-long process of going back and forth to Columbus, and I get the job. And then about 2 weeks after I get the job, I said to him, Mr. McConnell, who's going to be the president? We need a president. He said, well, you could be the president too. You could be the president. I think How do you think? I think he thought I was running like a peewee travel team. So the next thing, I'm the president, and I'm sitting there, and I had no employees. I mean, it was like a year and a half before we started, and I'm sitting there. So I pull out the Florida Panthers media guide, and I start looking through it and writing, okay, I need a VP of corporate sales, and I need a VP of this, and VP of tickets, and the senior VP of. So I went through and wrote out, and then ended up hiring like 250 people. It was a monumental task. And to think we started, I was the first employee, really. There was one other lawyer that was working there with them, but it was amazing to go through that whole process. We built the building, we built practice facilities. It was an amazing experience, to be quite honest, and something you never forget. But, it was tough sledding in expansion in those days with the players you got, but it was something. I was there. I ended up being there almost 10 years. So it was from the day I got there till the day I left was over 10 years. So I really appreciated the opportunity. We didn't have the success on the ice. That was frustrating. But that happened.
Well, just think about this, Doug. You're handed a blank sheet of paper and said, go get him, Tiger, and put a team on the ice in 2 years. We'll see it puck drop for the national anthem. Like, as you touched on, it must have been overwhelming at times. Like, who was the first person you hired?
You know what? The first person I hired was Jim Clark, who was a PI guy. I brought him in as my assistant GM, and Jim had a business background as well as a hockey background. So he and I sort of set the model as to how we were going to put the team. We built the management structure, both on the hockey and the business side. And then my next hire was to hire like a senior VP of business, and I hired a guy from the Panthers who I knew, and he came in and he was in charge of putting the business side together, and we worked together on that. And so it just went from there. And I remember looking one time, I think we had 5,000 resumes on file for people looking for jobs, and my phone never stopped ringing. I mean, it was exciting, but it was tough because you can't hire everybody. And but you know what? It was an experience I'll never give up. Thinking of all, I have fond memories of it, and frustrating with the hockey side, but it was tremendous memories.
Squid?
Jim Clark, he's from PEI as well, isn't he, Doug?
Yeah, Jim Clark is a guy that I met in second grade, and my son Clark is named after him. And he ran the Somerset Capitals for years. He was with Royal Bank teams when they went to the championship. He hired Dave Cameron in Somerset. And then he worked part-time with the Red Wings, full-time with Florida, and then came in with me. So yeah, he's a PEI guy, and now he's been with Ottawa he's director of pro scouting with Ottawa. He's been there for the last 10 years. So he's had a nice career, but he was assistant GM with me for 10 years. He was 10 years in Columbus as assistant GM.
Well, I met him a number of times over the years when I was in South Carolina and the ECHL and those sort of things. I ran into Jim quite a few times, actually.
Yeah,
real quality. I was going to say to you, Doug, did George McPhee or Ron Francis call you for any advice when they were starting up Vegas and Seattle?
I heard from George briefly. George used to call me more when he didn't have a job and he was looking for me to get a name on the radio in Toronto. I heard him more from that than I did after the fact. But it was quite a different setup rule-wise. So didn't look like they needed a lot of help with the job they did. But it was. I mean, we drafted guys. When you look at our expansion draft, we drafted guys, 90% of the guys we drafted because we didn't want them, and we had to take somebody. The guys that were exposed, it was unbelievable. Like, they would put free agents out there. Matthew Schneider was available to me, so you draft Matthew Schneider. Well, damn well Matthew Schneider as a free agent is not coming to Columbus. And, you know, it was unbelievable the way it was compared to you know, the Vegas situation. I mean, you think about it, Nashville come in, Atlanta come in, and us in Minnesota come in over a 3-year period. It was the cupboard was kind of dry, to be quite honest. So, you know, Reiser did a good job in Mini. Jock Mayer was a great hire. I hired Dave King. I thought it would work. Dave's with me 3 years, but I thought, you know, we ended up unbelievable. We ended up the first year with more points than Minnesota. And my owner, you think he won the Stanley Cup. We had 71 points and Minnesota had 70.
Well, I was going to ask you, what was it like dealing with the GMs in those days? Now, you're fairly new in the job. You got an expansion team. You're looking to build a network of people, build a brand. Were some of these guys, were the piranhas circling the wagons on you?
You know, they were toughened during the expansion process, but really because I had been with Brian for so long, I had a great relationship with Kenny Holland in Detroit. I knew quite a few of the guys. I found them really good deal with. I really did. There wasn't anybody that you didn't feel comfortable picking up the phone and talking to. And even today, you know, I feel comfortable picking up the phone and phoning anybody that was a GM when I was there or an assistant GM, and they were good people. They really were. Yeah, everybody's trying to win, but I thought it was a good relationship. I really did. You know,
Squid.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, it's fun. Hockey's a funny thing where you work with a lot of people. I played. And then got into coaching and that sort of thing, and then coached in the minors and coached Calgary's farm team. So you meet a lot of really wonderful people in the game of hockey. And you know what? Years and years later, you run into these people or you meet them somewhere, and it was like you never really stopped talking to them, and you just keep going. I found that anyway, that you know.
You know what? I think the one thing I always admired about the NHL, and I used to say this to my staff all the time, to play in the NHL, people have no idea how tough it is to make the NHL. And I used to say to my guys, even if a guy plays one game in the NHL, that means he had to be a hell of a player. So for guys that have long careers in the NHL, you know, and I know what it's like from a coaching management perspective, but I didn't have to lace the skates on. And I have, and I think as a coach and a manager, that's the one thing I always kept at the forefront of my mind: respect for the players, respect for what they have to do. And I think it helped me with relationships from coaching to management. There's not one guy that I ever coached or managed that I didn't like as a person. Lots I didn't like the way they played, but nobody I didn't like as a person. And I think it's a respect thing. I mean, look, you scored 50 goals. You had a long career. You know how hard it is to do that and to accomplish that. It really is. It's something special, man. It really is, you know.
Especially when Harold Ballard's your goddamn owner.
I'm not
so
sure
much
how I would make out with Harold. But anyway, I was a big Leafs fan in those days, so Harold was, oh my God. But you know what? Owners are tough, Ricky. I'll tell you what. People ask what's the toughest part of being a GM. When you have to deal with an owner, they're tough guys. They've all made all kinds of money, and they think making it in the NHL being successful in the NHL is an automatic. Well, let me tell you, it's not like business. Some people got lucky and made their money. Some people were really smart and made their money. But being a winner in the NHL, for owners, it's tough. It really is. But they're not easy to deal with, let me tell you.
Well, let's just pick up on that part right there, Doug, because again, the time is always the essence of the game. So we got about 10 minutes left here and so much I want to get through with you on. But the three-pronged sort of effect of alluring a player: one, you have to like him; two, you have to convince the owner; number three, you got to deal with probably the most important player or the player in the whole deal is the agent. Maybe explain to the listeners and all of us the role of the agent and how powerful these guys are, because let's face it, a guy like a Donnie Meehan, if you get in the wrong side of him, you may never see a player.
Yeah, you know what? The relationship with agents, I think it's not. I never found it that difficult. I think you know they're like everybody in the business. They want you to be honest with them, and you want them to be honest with you. Like I used to say to Pat Morris all the time. You know, I would come home in the summer and I would sit up and look at the ocean and fight with Pat Morris all day long about contracts, you know. And I used to say, thank God at least I could sit at my cottage and look at the ocean and fight with you. I don't have to do it in an office in Detroit or Columbus or wherever I happen to be at the time. But you know what? You get a knack of working with guys. Some GMs become very tight with certain agents. I remember going up to an agent, and you know, you got to be careful about tampering, but I remember going up to the draft and I was looking for a veteran guy in Columbus to be a captain and to be a real important guy for us. And I remember going up to this agent and said, look, I know I need a right shot defenseman who's a character guy, who's a tough guy, who's been a winner. And I really, July 1st, need that type of player. And I don't know if you have that type of player, but I really need that player. Well, he wasn't stupid. He knew who I was talking about, and it was Adam Foote. So, you know, it wasn't tampering, but it sort of was a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know what? I think you develop relationships with agents, and I used to get mad at them, and they get mad at me, but at the end of the day, it was business, and you do the deal or you don't do the deal. So I think it's sort of Larry Kelly met at one time and didn't speak to me for a year over a guy, a guy that ended up being a minor league. And I thought, oh, geez. But anyway, overall, we had pretty strong, I thought pretty good relationships. And you have to. You're right. You have to work with them. And they're not that hard to work with if the truth was really known. As long as you get what they want.
Well, let me ask you this. Was there ever where you have to give a little bit and take a little bit? So on an instance where a player, maybe you would take a little less for a player, give a little less for a player, maybe looking down the road, that you would get it back from the agent on a bigger fish down the road?
I think there would never be a promise or a guarantee on that. But, if you looked after them on certain guys,
that's what I was referring to.
They would think about dealing with you again because it was a positive thing. That would be what it would be more of. Yeah.
Okay. That's fair enough. That's a good answer. Well, how about the media side? How do we get up? Go ahead, Squid.
So hold on.
Here we go.
You're talking about this, and I had a deal in a time where you had Al Eagleson, who is the biggest agent, but he was also like this with every single goddamn owner in the league. And we didn't have salary disclosure. We didn't have any of that kind of stuff. In fact, free agency was 32 years old. Not many guys made it to 32 back then. So it was a lot more difficult. You know what? And I know Eagleson for sure had GM say, okay, give this guy $50,000 less, but I want this guy to make $100,000 more. And he made those deals all the time. So
yeah, I don't doubt that. You know what? That was, those days were a little different. I don't know that if today's agents, now the big guys would know owners, but I never had a situation in my 20 plus years of an agent dealing directly with an owner. Maybe it happens. Obviously it does the odd time. But I never had that situation. I never had that they would go around me. The Eagle, that was different. I agree. It was a challenging time. I walked into the Starbucks in Delray Beach about 3 years ago, and maybe 5 years ago now, and I was going in to get a coffee, and this guy goes, "Hey, Mac," and I turned, it's Al Eagleson sitting having a coffee, and I thought, holy shit! So I sat talking to him for like an hour. I never knew the guy really. I never had met him. And so anyway, but those days were, Yeah, you talked to some of the older players, and it wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty. But I think today's agents, I think it's a lot different. I really do.
Hey, Squid, how do you like that? At least
For
he
the
knew
better.
Doug's name. He didn't even know your name.
Yeah, okay, so here's Eagleson. I was a fifth pick overall by Vancouver, and I'm with Al Eagleson. So he goes around to every team to talk about the player association and everything during training camp. So, and when he came to Vancouver or when he went to any city, he would take his clients out for a nice dinner at a nice restaurant. So I go to the restaurant, I'm sitting there, and one of the guys working for him wasn't Sam Simpson, but it was somebody else came over and said, what's your name? I said, Rick Vod. But then the next thing I see him bolt right over to Al Eagleson and whisper something to him. And I'm thinking to myself, fuck, I was a fifth overall pick and he didn't have a clue who the hell I am. Like, so then when I got traded to Toronto, Bill Waters was with him. And then Bill left Al. And right away, that was the first thing I did. I said, okay, I'm done. I'm going with Bill because he's the only guy I ever talked to or knew my name.
Well, Doug, we're getting down again. We're down to a couple minutes here.
Well,
talk about the media side. Oh, sorry.
His name up in front of Bobby Orr, whatever you do.
Doug, talk about your media side and how that came about. Just we got a few minutes left here.
The media side, you know, when I left Columbus there, actually I got 2 calls. One from Nick Kyprios, who I had coached in Baltimore in the American Hockey League, and he said, "How about coming?" And the other call was from Bob Cowan. You know, hey, I'm going to talk to the boss. We'd like to. Why don't you consider coming here and working with us? And so I went, and then you know what, I don't know. It was a great 8 or 10 years for me. It really was. It was, you know what, I probably hurt my opportunity to get back in the league a bit because I maybe shot my mouth off too much. But you know what, it was a great run. I really enjoyed it. I had great friends there, and I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed the 10 years.
Well, maybe touch on your
except for Bob McCowan, though.
Yeah, well,
Except for
I was
Bob
going to say
McCowan.
touch on, yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
How did that
Actually,
battle come
I
about?
phoned Bob. Hey, after that battle, because it's silly, because Vasily had approached me to help him get a team, to get a franchise in Hamilton, and I didn't tell Bob about it. And then it was announced that I was doing some advising for Vasily. Bob snapped and lost his shit, and then he made a big deal on the radio that night. So after we had this amazing fight on the air, I was standing on the goddamn side of a highway. I was out to dinner, and I was on the side of a highway in PEI yelling at each other for 25 minutes. So then after it was over, I phoned him the next morning at 8 o'clock, and I said, what the hell was that bullshit all about? Oh, well, I didn't know about it. And then of course, I listened for the next little while about how he wouldn't have me on his show and all this bullshit. But anyway, it was kind of funny. I get a kick out of it. We laughed about it lots. I've been to his house in San. I mean, it was a lot of bullshit is what it was. But anyway, my 92-year-old mother passed away 2 years ago. And until the day she passed, she used to say, how's your relationship with that radio guy in Toronto? So it certainly made an impact on her life. So
McGowan.
It was fun.
McGowan.
You kept calling his name wrong.
McGowan. I remember.
Oh no, I call it by his name all the time on purpose.
Yeah.
That became obvious, and you were getting to him pretty good. That was pretty funny. Well, listen, Doug, we want to thank you so much for joining us. We could talk to you all night. Fantastic stories. I'm glad we finally got the time right, even though the guy who's on the show with me here knows nothing about Prince Edward Island, and the time difference. But it all worked.
Excuse me?
My fault. But listen, thanks for having me on. And
are those your old skates up in the corner there, Mac? Are those your old skates up there, hanging up on the wall?
Those are my son's first pair of skates when he was playing might hockey in Detroit. So we saved those. So.
Well, great. Well, listen, we want to thank you for joining us, and all the best to you, and we'll see you hopefully soon.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Take care,
Good
Doug.
luck, guys. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, man.
Okay, bud. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.